This next part of the lesson, we're going to talk about order of operations. Remember from math, it's really important to understand the order that you're going to do things. Otherwise, you might not get the same answer that you should. So remember, we're going to do things in parentheses. Now, in computer science, a lot of times we have a lot of parentheses and we have parentheses inside others. So it's important to know that you're going to start on the very inside. Then you're going to do exponents or powers. After that, you multiply and divide from left to right, and then add and subtract from left to right. But we have a new operator now called the modulus, and mod happens at the same time as multiplying and divide. So whichever one you see first as you go from left to right between mod, multiply, and divide, that's the one that you'll do. So a couple examples of why order of operations is important. We've got a couple operations here. And again, down here, exact same numbers, parentheses, adding, multiplying. It looks pretty similar, but if you run both of them, you get a slightly different result. You get a much shorter line here than here, and that's because of the order of operations is going to lead to a smaller number in this first one. So what we're going to do now is write some code that's going to determine divisibility. And you're going to start out asking the user to give you a number, then you're going to ask for another number. You're going to divide them, and if they're divisible, you are going to tell the user that they are. If they're not, you're going to ask for numbers again. So the first thing we want to do is ask for a number, and we want to store it. So I'm going to call this first one number one equals input. Please type a number, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to call this one number 2 and ask for please type another number. And then we're going to figure out whether they're divisible or not. So using modulus, if they're divisible, the remainder will be 0. And we want to keep going over and over again to decide, so that if they're not divisible, we ask for those numbers again. So I'm going to set up a while loop, and I'm going to say while number 1 modulus number 2, and I want to find out if it's not equal to 0, then we need to do something again. So the not operator is the exclamation point. So if that is not equal to 0, then we're going to ask for some more numbers, right? So I will say, I'm just going to grab these two lines again. And then because this is a loop, I need to make sure that this one is also indented. So if it comes down here, they'll type a number, they'll type another number. If they're not divisible, it will continue and do this over and over again. Now, if I run this, I'm going to get an error. So let's run it and see what happens, see if it gives me an error message. So please type a number. I'm going to type 4. I'm going to type 5. And now it's giving an error because this line right here, while number 1% number 2, it says it's a type error. So they were not converted during string formatting. The problem is when you use input, it sees it as a string or just characters, but it doesn't see it as a number. So I need to turn that into a number by saying int and then putting parentheses around the rest of the statement. I'll do the same thing with the next one, int, and put the parentheses in here as well. And now it should work. So let's see, if I type in something like 5 and then 4, it says please type a number. I also need to fix this one down here, otherwise it'll say the same thing. So I'll put in my parentheses here. Right. And I think I also would like it to tell someone why I'm asking for another number. So I'm going to print those numbers are not divisible. And I'm going to come down here, and if they are divisible, I'm going to let the user know that. So I'm going to go back to the original indenting, and I'm going to print your numbers are divisible. So let's give it a try. Let's see, I've got an error here because I have a while loop and then I didn't indent this print statement. So we'll hit tab to indent that, try it again, type a number. If I type something like 4 and 2, it says your numbers are divisible. If I run it again and try them the other way around, those numbers are not divisible, type a number. And it will keep going until I get numbers that work out. 10 and 2, those are divisible. So that worked pretty well. This just talks about that in some programs, if you give numbers that are too large, you can get errors. Python 3 handles really large numbers really well, so it won't cause us a problem in the things that we're doing. All right, so we're going to talk about how to loop a number of times. And then this just talks about how if you're going to take the AP exam, there's some certain ways that they use the AP exam. So if that's something you want to do, make sure you talk to me about how to do that. Let's take a look here. What do we think this is going to do? It creates a turtle. It gives it a color. And then while space is less than 80, it's going to go somewhere. It's going to go right. It's going to go forward. It's going to make some circles. It's going to change some colors. All right, let's take a look and see what happens. Oh, notice each time it's going out farther and farther and it's changing colors and making a spiral. Why did it go out farther and farther? Well, as it's going and counting, it's going to make 80 of these circles, but each time it's going to go out farther than the one before. It's going to take spiral space, multiply it by 3, and then add that to 50. So the first will be out 50, then 53, then 56, then 59, etc., until it's gone all the way outside of the square. So that's a pretty cool design. The next thing that we're going to do is talk about how to do that kind of thing. So your job is to draw something, make a little design, use some math like the ones that we were just talking about to make your design kind of interesting. All right, so now's a good time to pause. You can write that code in Visual Studio and then come back to the lesson. All right, so when you come back, a nested while loop is going to mean that you're going to have a loop inside another loop. So maybe you want to uh, move forward and then you want to turn twice and then move forward and then turn twice. So that turn twice you could do by writing it twice, but you could also do it by doing a while loop. Now, if you're turning twice, that's not a big deal, but what if you're doing quite a few things? Over and over, it might be better to use a while loop on the inside. So let's take a look what happens here. While j is less than 10, it's going to print j. And then Notice this is indented. There's a while I is less than 5, it's going to print I, and it's going to continue counting up. So what this is going to do is say J1, and then it's going to count I 1 to 5, and then it's going to make J2, and then count I 1 to 5. So let's see how that works. All right, notice it did J is 1, and then I is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. J is 2, I is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you have a loop that's inside another loop, they call that a nested loop. All right. We're going to use some while loops to navigate a robot that's a turtle through a maze. So you're going to go over to Visual Studio. You're going to download the mazes from the top of this file and copy them into the directory that you've been using for Visual Studio. And then you're going to make the robot walk through that maze. So I'm going to demonstrate here without the maze, just of how this program actually works. Now they've defined some commands. One is called move, and what that does is move forward. And then they've designed one called turn left, and that's going to turn left 90 degrees. And then also a reset that goes back to where it started. So then they create a turtle. They're giving it the shape of turtle, telling it which direction to start. Now I'm going to comment out this part because I'm not going to put this over in Visual Studio right now. I just want you to see how this whole thing works. So if I run it right now, nothing really happens. It's just a turtle that shows up right here. But if I take out this block comment and run it again, notice that the turtle moved forward 3 steps, right? Why did it go 3 steps? Because it said while I is less than 3, and then it makes I bigger and it moves forward. We could also have it do some turning. We could have it turn, go forward. So that's with the turn left command. So I could also, I could have it move, and then I could have it turn left. Commands always have to have parentheses after them, like it shows up here. So if I run this, it should go forward, turn left, go forward, turn left, go forward. Let's watch. All right, so each time it turned, it went forward, it turned left, it went forward, it turned left, it went forward, it turned left. And so those are the commands you're going to use in Visual Studio. Now this would be a lot more interesting if we could actually see the map, but you have to do that in Visual Studio. It won't work here. So your first map is going to be to basically find a way to get to the gray square here. Your second one, you're going to start in the bottom left, and you're going to find 2 different ways to get to the gray square, going around 2 different directions. One of these works quite a bit better if you have a turn, and then inside your loop you have a forward, and then a turn, and then forward. So you use a nested loop for that one. And then this one, we want to get to both of these 2 squares. All right. Notice in number 3, you should use 1 outer loop, multiple nested inner loops, and then when they get to the gray square, we want to change the color to something new. Right. So that's what you're going to do for kind of the project at the end of this lesson.